Welcome to this program entitled Minding Brain Health in the Clinic, Realistic Strategies for Managing an Aging Population. I'm Dr. Chuck Vega, and I'm very delighted to be joined today by a real expert in the field, Dr. Malaz Boustani. Thank you as well to PeerView and Bright Focus Foundation for bringing us this educational program, and for Lily for providing an educational grant for this workshop. You can participate in this session by polling, so look out for some questions that are going to be coming at you soon. And also, please submit your questions in the chat. We will try to answer them throughout the session today. And there are some additional resources, peerview.com, 2025 Brain Health. And you can there's some social media links as well. So our goals for the program today are to really try to understand Alzheimer's disease as a continuum, from the basics of its pathology, which began decades before the onset of clinical symptoms, right through folks with more moderate to severe dementia. And how do you manage this important disease at all stages? We'll be talking about how to help patients understand that brain health is important throughout their life. Those same risk factors that we focus on a lot in primary care, which is my practice, for when we think about them for maybe cardio, renal, metabolic health, also very important for brain health as well. And in order to find Alzheimer's disease and other cognitive disorders early, we need to think about screening. So we'll be talking about that. There's some great screeners out there. You're probably using some. So look forward to hearing what your experience is as well. And finally, how do you actually employ these? Alzheimer's disease is such a feared diagnosis, and understandably so. But there are always messages of hope, even in more severe cases. And so we'll be talking about how to effectively communicate and engage patients and their supporters as part of a treatment team. So let's start with the very tip of the iceberg, exploring some of the depths of Alzheimer's disease process. So we know that we really are facing an epidemic of Alzheimer's disease. As the population grows older in the United States, we are seeing more and more cases. Overall worldwide, there are over 55 million people living with dementia. It's certainly something that is very much related to age as a primary risk factor. From 80 to 89 years old, nearly a quarter of those individuals in the United States have some type of dementia, and most of the cases certainly are Alzheimer's dementia. But it's important to realize that 40% to 20% of cases are not Alzheimer's dementia. There are other causes of cognitive disorders: vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, etc. You can see that the rates of Alzheimer's disease are higher at certain populations, higher in women, higher in Black and Hispanic individuals, and there are the major genetic risk factors such as APOE4 allele carriage. And I think that you might ask, well, why is it higher in my racial and ethnic minority groups, for one thing? Well, that's the patients I practice with, and I could say that one of the big factors is those cardiovascular risk factors are much higher. They're much more prevalent in those populations and less likely to be controlled. Uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled hypertension, which ultimately contributes and leads to some dementia. So I mentioned that the pathological processes of Alzheimer's disease began decades before there's actually any symptoms. So this is such a rich area of investigation and a rich area to target. And we should always think about, this is the time we want to intervene. We want to intervene, really as early as possible. Developing healthy lifestyle habits, I hate to say it, even from childhood, really does make a difference in terms of sustaining those habits. And then healthy metabolism, healthy body weight over time. But by the time you get to, you're having neuronal death and large scale damage, across the central nervous system, that's going to lead to mild cognitive impairment, and many of those patients will develop dementia. In terms of some biomarkers, this is really where the field of dementia care has gone. So we are moving more towards really trying to identify the biological processes, the pathological processes underlying Alzheimer's disease. So you can see that some of the first markers are beta amyloid in the CSF, and it can be detected through PET scan fairly early in this disease process, well before there are symptoms. So again, well before there are symptoms. I think the other thing I would highlight about this slide, just we will be coming back to the application of biomarkers later on, is that idea of cognitive reserve. I'm sure this has been your experience. It's certainly been mine in practice, is that folks with low educational attainment who aren't really, they're scrambling to take care of their families. They're scrambling to work two different jobs, and but they're not always getting that stimulation of the brain. They're not exercising that brain regularly. Those folks are more likely to show symptoms earlier. But folks with a high reserve who have been cognitively intact, have high educational attainment, have resources at their disposal, they tend to display symptoms a little bit later. So I think that that's another important factor. And that's kind of not on so much on the biologic side. That's really, I think, more one of the social factors that's really important in affecting AD. That said, when you see a patient with AD, the course could be quite different. But we do want to think about these different biomarkers. We want to think about amyloid. We want to think about tau protein. It's actually the accumulation of tau in the brain that correlates better when it comes to the severity of cognitive dysfunction versus amyloid. But they're both very important processes in Alzheimer's disease. And we could spend the rest of this talk debating amyloid versus tau, but I hope we don't. But there are other there's other biomarkers as well, neurofilament light chain, which is it's a sign of neuronal damage. So these are all things that we can actually measure, and I think how we might measure them is there are CSF analyses, there's PET scanning, and we'll touch on new blood biomarkers as well, and that's really kind of something that's has emerged. And is continuing to be studied and now applied in clinical practice. So it's a very exciting time, I think, particularly for primary care and for many of our patients who don't necessarily have access to the PET scan or to getting a CSF analysis. So before we move on, please take a moment to answer this follow-up poll about the developmental course of Alzheimer's disease, biomarkers, and cognitive impairment symptoms. And with that, Malaz, are you ready to take us into seminar 2?
Well, thank you, Chuck. That was really a good summary. I learned a lot, and it was very important, especially this biomarker concept that is new in our field for the past 5-10 years now. So now I'm going to go about the brain health in focus and how we can promote it across the entire lifespan. So let's start with a case of 72-year-old woman who is coming over to her annual wellness visit with you. She came with her son. She's kind of concerned a little bit that she's been maybe forgetful for the past 3 years, at least from the son perspective. For example, she completely forget the details of the telephone conversations that she had with her son. She is taking a lot of medication, a couple of psychotropic medication like an SSRI. She's taking muscle relaxant. She's taking alprazolam. And she has an actual history of depressive symptom, anxiety on top of a chronic back pain that make her use the muscle relaxant. No family history of dementia, which is good. And she has some snoring, excessive daytime sleepiness. Her mood is still, despite taking SSRI, it's still low. And her son noticed that even her hearing is not good as used to be. So he detected some hearing impairments. So brain health, as you know, is the most important health, in my opinion, for humans. There's a WHO definition of brain health that I love it. It primarily look at the brain health and function in a very wide, inclusive way. We all know without the brain, you can't stay alive. But on top of it, the brain focus on thinking. That's part of the job of the brain, your emotion, and also your motor function or your behavior in particular. And then for us as a species, if you have a really good thinking or cognition, a good emotion, and a good motor function, that will allow you to become emotionally intelligent, socially intelligent, and by doing so, you will become, you continue to become an amazing person in your society. So I just want to focus also on, remember, to the best of my knowledge, there is really no brain transplant. So your brain, you have no backup plan. So you have to focus on keep it as healthy as possible. The good news is this amazing paper that came out last summer in Lancet that put things together and send in a very, very powerful message about how to keep your brain healthy. This study found there's 14 modifiable risk factor that account for 45%, almost 50% of future risk of developing dementia and cognitive decline. And if you look at these 14 modifiable risk factor, some of them start early life and some of them are later life, but the majority of them are in the midlife. And just next May 23, I will turn 54. So technically, I am in the midlife, and this has become very, very important for me, especially with my own risk for developing future dementia. So this gave me a lot of not just soft hope, but a very concrete, operationalizable hope. And let me go focus on this midlife. Number one, hearing impairment, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes management, make sure I have a healthy weight, stop smoking, make sure I don't hit my head and have traumatic brain injury, emotional health with a focus on depression, make sure I don't excessively drink alcohol. A lot of overlap in these midlife risk factor modification, not just with healthy brain, but also healthy heart. In the later life, uncorrected visual impairment is important, social isolation, and we learned that from COVID, in particular in air pollution. These are the 14 modified risk factor that can reduce the risk of dementia by almost a half. And then how do you manage them? You are a primary care clinician. You are the master in prevention. I don't think any other discipline is as good in prevention as primary care clinician. And a lot of your prevention strategy for healthy heart can be beautifully translated. So you get two gifts in the price of one. If you think about it. So I'll focus a lot on the specific one for cognitive health, which is hearing aids and taking care of your hearing loss, your sleep and sleep hygiene in particular, your social isolation management, and finally cognitive exercise to stay sharp. These are specific for brain health, but the common feature of brain health modifiable risk factor with a healthy heart are the typical cholesterol, diabetes management, hypertension management, obesity, mental health management, protecting your head and prevention of traumatic brain injury, staying active physically, and looking after your eyes, in particular if you have a diabetes, and obviously not smoke. So within that piece, the other big thing for you under your control and you as a primary care doctor, especially if your patient who are 65 and older have multiple chronic condition, they will end up taking a lot of medication, and some of these medication might have adverse cognitive effects that can increase the risk of developing dementia, specifically anticholinergic. And therefore, in that population, you can try to de-prescribe anticholinergic, stop them under your control, make sure you have monitored for any unintended consequences, and then you'll be in very good shape with that perspective. So I hope now to move you and maybe hand it over the baton to Chuck to discuss with you and share with you overcoming barrier to patient conversation about brain health. Chuck?
Yeah, absolutely. I ran track. I get it. So yeah, I'm happy to take on this third leg, but I do want to make a comment on a couple of things you mentioned. Just those modifiable risk factors, so important for us in primary care to identify them. And then we always want to be sentinels when we think about overall preventive care for, particularly for older adults, but even in our middle-aged adults, it's important as well. One thing that became really clear to me, and I became more of a sentinel for, was during lockdown and pandemic when we were doing a lot more telehealth. And I realized how many of my older adults really had problems hearing. So oftentimes they were older, they couldn't do the video visits. We were stuck with telephone visits. And boy, it was really hard to communicate with them. And so in addition to the A1C and like, let's change your medications a little bit, like, let's get a hearing, test for you as well, because and that really is one of the most modifiable risk factors. Think about how frustrating it is when you can't hear regularly, you can't understand people, and you already have some cognitive dysfunction. Could make MCI appear a lot more like mild or even moderate dementia. And then the
And
only other
Chuck,
thing, yeah, go ahead, Malaz.
just to make comment on that, the good thing in the United States in the past couple of years, the price of the hearing aid has been substantially dropped. So that's give us an opportunity to detect hearing loss early on and not bankrupt the family to get the hearing aid for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I work just exclusively with low-income families, and it's a challenge. And we have been able to get those hearing aids. Now you have to actually wear the hearing aid for it to work, is what it turns out. So that's a whole nother fight that usually takes a few months after. But we adjust and get it right. And the only other thing I'd say is that I'm really trying to work now on the social isolation aspects as well, which was of course a ton worse during the pandemic. So it really laid that problem bare, and just how much people suffer when they don't have human contact. So I really work particularly with my older adults who aren't working anymore. Do you have regular goals and a routine that keeps you active physically and mentally? And especially, do you have social contacts? If not, I turn to other resources that I know in my community that can help: nonprofits, senior centers, some city and county organizations that help. So yeah, I really try to get engaged there too, because you can do everything else right, but if you lose that piece, your patient's still going to be at high risk. And many patients don't want to talk about this. There's stigma associated with Alzheimer's disease. One of the primary reasons they don't want to think about it, and they have denial, is that they don't want to be seen as a burden to their families. And it's incredibly frustrating to lose cognitive function slowly over time. Also, there's a perception that most folks, when they hear about symptoms associated with mild cognitive impairment, they think that's just normal aging. Oh, grandma, she's just repeating herself, and yeah, she got lost a couple times, but there was a lot of congestion, and there was a traffic diversion that day. No, those are definitely, when I'm hearing those things, I'm processing them and thinking this person needs to be screened for real cognitive impairment here. There are also some clinical barriers on our side. We don't always have a lot of time, and so that's a big challenge. This is one, I think, when you're assessing somebody for cognitive dysfunction, you really want to spend some time. The good news is we have continuity. Maybe I can't fit it in today, but I'm going to try to arrange at your next visit and put in my note next time, do the cognitive screen, look for risk factors. Because today it was about my shoulder pain and my foot pain and hypertension or what have you. You need to address those patient issues first, but I always come back. I don't let go of the cognitive dysfunction, and it would help to have biomarkers, particularly more available in primary care, because right now we are using these clinical diagnostic tools, which are excellent, and I'm going to go through them. But at the same time, backing it up with that objective evidence is really, really important. And then we don't have enough Dr. Boustanis around. We need a lot more specialists in this area. We need more geriatricians overall. We need more neurologists and other folks who can provide that really specialized care and be our wing people, in addition to ourselves as primary care, who can maybe provide that extra level of care for folks with dementia. And sometimes it's even saying the same thing, from two different offices, talking about some of these basic interventions to make, some of the pharmacological interventions too. But hearing it from different resources sometimes makes a bigger difference, especially in somebody with cognitive impairment. So when I talk about brain health, I just talk about the fact that as Malaz was saying, the brain is just like any other organ. There's wear and tear on it. We want to set folks up from the get-go for good brain health over time, and that we now have more effective treatments than ever. So we always want to end our discussions with messages of hope. Even in terminal cases, I still end with a message of hope. We're still going to respect your wishes. We are going to treat you with dignity throughout. We are going to make you as as comfortable and as safe as possible. Those are small messages of hope, even the bleakest of circumstances. And so while we understand that everybody experiences cognitive aging at different degrees, we really want to maximize your function over time. And that's one of my favorite things to do in terms of message of hope, is take somebody with those earliest stages of mild cognitive impairment where we're able to detect them early. And they always have questions like, well, should I go on this big trip? And, should I talk to my brother whom I haven't, spoken to in 18 years because of some fight over Thanksgiving many years ago? And it's always, my answer is 99.99% of the time, yes, yes, and absolutely yes. Like, it's not going to get better. So now's the time to do those things. And helping folks to do those things is actually a real great joy for both them, their families, and me too in my practice. And if you want to learn a little bit more about this process and how to have that shared decision making with patients, there is a supplemented video practice aid that you can log on to. So I really want to. I think that because this is a sensitive issue, I ask permission. Is it okay if we talk about your brain health today? Is a nice way to introduce it. Patients don't know necessarily what that means, where I'm coming from, but yeah, of course they're concerned about their brain. And then I may mention, I notice you've been missing a lot of your medications, and you've missed a couple appointments now. What's going on? Do you find that there's more forgetfulness? And then just remember to use silence. Let the patient tell their story. Give them space, and then let them tell their story. Use a lot of empathy as they're speaking. A lot of times there might be some tears here and some real difficult times. But again, you're identifying something really important that is going to be a major impact on their lives, and you want to get on board with diagnosis and treatment ASAP. And so I think those are some of the principles of communication. For folks who really are bearing down and do not want to discuss this, again, be a good sentinel. So that patient who always was getting their medications on time, got their labs before every clinic visit, just like you ordered, and saw like 3 specialists. Having a chronic illness, especially if you have 3 or 4, is a full-time job. It's a complex mental task. And so we in primary care, the patients who are falling off that task, particularly if I don't get to see their family members or their loved ones coming in with them, and so I don't really have a reporter available, then I think it's really good for us to think about. Patients who get in a car accident, patients who have, and certainly when the family member comes in whom I haven't seen ever, and they're there after 7 years of seeing the patient, and the patient is an older adult, many times it's because that's exactly what they want to discuss. I'm worried about my uncle, my dad, my aunt, whomever, slowing down. And sometimes it's a concerned neighbor as well, or somebody who's a part of an organization they're in. And so I see those relationships too. Don't just think about the family. There's other relationships that are critically important there as well. And then, especially, I work in 80% of my patients or so prefer speaking Spanish. There's a lot of stigma. There's stigma, but mostly it's really kind of a lack of insight and knowledge into the process of Alzheimer's disease. So many of my patients, when I tell them, when I ultimately say, well, this is a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, they really don't know what I'm talking about. And so you just go at your patient's pace and ask what they know. What do you know about Alzheimer's disease? Well, not much. I just know it affects the brain, and you die from it, and then so you pull back from that. Well, actually it's a long process of an illness, and there are interventions we can make that will make a difference in terms of how you feel and how you're able to think and act. So hopefully you found that helpful. Before we move on, please take a moment to answer this follow-up poll on educating patients about brain health and screening for cognitive decline. Okay, thanks. So now let's talk about applying effective communication strategies in patient conversations about brain health. So we have a case. This is Frederica. She's 72 years old. She's been experiencing some forgetfulness. She's accompanied by her son, who reports that Frederica has become increasingly forgetful over the past 3 years. Sometimes forgets the details of a phone conversation that they just had, repeating questions during the phone call. So if we look at her med history, so important. This is, again, low-hanging fruit. I talked about hearing loss. This is, and Malaz talked about med reconciliation and really trying to deprescribe. This is another rich area. It can make a big difference pretty quickly for older adults. So she's on a daily SSRI, okay, high-dose gabapentin, high-dose muscle relaxant, nightly alprazolam. I'm getting anxiety just looking at this med list. And then, and she does have depression, anxiety, and chronic back pain. So you have to respect those. We still want to treat those, but maybe we could think about some options. No family history of dementia. She has snoring and excessive daytime sleepiness. She has low mood. Okay. And she's hearing impaired. All right. So I think we have a lot to work with, Frederica, and we are going to. So, Malaz, when you see her case, like what stands out to you as some of the, some of the reversible things that we could maybe make a change in terms of her cognitive function?
Well, ironically, Chuck, is I see this and I see a lot of opportunity for family to come back and the patient come back and say, "You have saved my mom." I mean, this is one in geriatrics in general, and in dementia in particular. When I started my fellowship almost 20 plus years ago, the future was always a really bleak, and except when you have these kind of cases of potentially reversible cognitive decline, not dementia, but reversible cognitive decline. And the big ones are these two things that you highlight. As you know, Chuck, if you have major depression, and if you get the right treatment for major depression, you can be in remission 50 to 80% of the time within 12 months. I mean, amazing for depression. And if you are taking all these medication with adverse cognitive effect, like the benzodiazepine, the muscle relaxants, and if you take them out, the attention and concentration will get better, and they will feel very quickly that they are a little bit more aware, more alert, and more oriented. So deprescribing for me become a really amazing opportunity to make difference for these patients, for this patient in particular, and her son might notice that more than her. And the second one is it's really optimizing the management of her depression and anxiety.
So what, yeah, Malaz, I'd love your perspective as I editorialize here for a second with the muscle relaxants. When I started in training, baclofen was really reserved for folks with severe chronic neuromuscular disease. So they had cerebral palsy, they had a stroke with a painful myopathy, and so it was really only those patients. Now, if you lift up a bag of groceries and you strain your back, it seems like folks are getting like 100 tablets of baclofen. And it's just, that's a really powerful sedating drug. I don't get it, and really just try to, minimize the use. And if I'm using a muscle relaxant, I'm going to use the one that's the least sedating and certainly for the shortest time possible. And, it's hard to treat pain, certainly in older adults, but using, I hope that Frederica, really got a multimodal approach to pain that really focused less on pharmacotherapy, which could be, there's not a lot of great choices there when you're 72 years of age, and instead really try to refocus. And sometimes you get a little extra bang for your buck by combining, if she's going to a yoga class or a Tai Chi class, that could also be a chance for socialization for her too. So that's kind of a win-win for a lot of patients.
I mean, Jug, the problem, as you know, as a primary care, is the pressure from the media that put on the patients for looking for that miracle drug. And they come over and almost like they demanding that prescription. And you have to be, as a primary care doctor, trying to really listen to that and convert it into an opportunity to talk about this multimodal treatment for pain and mental health. And I bet for this patient, her pain and her depression were feeding off each other, like crazy, create that loop that you have to break, hopefully. And maybe the depression piece can give you an opportunity to take her off these medications. But man, if they came over and say, my family member or my friend was in back pain and took these pills and everything went awesome. I mean, that is what we deal with, and which is really, really hard, especially when you don't have time even on top of that.
The only other thing I would add to this case is the fact that you have that vicious circle. You're absolutely right of the pain and depression, but probably what's accelerating that nasty merry-go-round is the sleep. So if she also has OSA, or if she's having sleep disturbance because of the depression, that just makes everything worse. So I talked about how I'm trying to do a better job of emphasizing patients' goals and social enrichment earlier in their life. But the other thing we really want to emphasize throughout the life course is healthy sleep. It makes a huge difference in a good number of outcomes. So definitely modifiable.
You're so right. You're so right. Absolutely so right. So let me end with asking you for this section before we move on. Please take a moment to answer a follow-up poll about modifiable risk factor that can impact brain health.
All right. So we do have another case now, and this is Sabrina. She's 48 years old. She comes in for her annual physical exam. Now, she's a software engineer. She works between 50 and 55 hours per week. She has a divorced mother, two high school students live with her full time. You can see some of her numbers here. Her LDL is a little high at 155. Her HDL is 80, and her blood pressure is also modestly elevated. Her BMI is 28. She has insomnia 2 or 3 nights per week, but she says she can't exercise even though she wants to because of her time in work and her time with kids. Now, she used to drink alcohol. She stopped 5 years ago. Her mother and father are still alive in the early 70s. Mother was recently diagnosed with mild Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Father has hypertension and type 2 diabetes. So what do you think, Malaz, when we think about this case, and maybe any comments on Sabrina and how you might approach her case?
Sabrina remind me of myself. I lost my father to dementia last May, almost a year ago, but he lived with it for almost 5, 6 years. So when we diagnosed, and I actually missed diagnosing my father, just FYI. Like I completely missed it by at least 2 to 3 years because I didn't do this. We don't do a typical. I didn't follow what we're discussing here. But when he was diagnosed, I was literally terrified, like her, and I start paying attention a lot about brain health and looking around and trying to identify my risk profile in particular, and then modify them step by step. So my cholesterol, my blood pressure, and particularly, I paid attention to drop the blood pressure to below 130, for example, as you know. So I start paying attention to my diet. My exercise was the hardest part, Chuck, is to change it. So for Sabrina, what I will leverage this opportunity to really have a conversation about her with the brain health. Number one, does she care about her brain or not? And sometimes just having that question, Chuck, it's give them permission. And I right away say, I'm worried about my brain. I share with them my own story. And we have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. And I think if Sabrina's more focused on the here and now, which I completely understand because she's stretched really thin, would be just asking like, well, how is your function at work and with your kids? How's your concentration? Pretty good. I have a feeling she would like to be sharper. And so, that might be a good moment to talk about, lifestyle and sleep. I'm not going to, does she need a hypnotic agent? And, well, okay, we'll just kind of use that to get her to 7 or 8 hours of sleep. No, I think that's not a choice at all I'd want to make right now. Instead, it's really a kind of like what you had, Malaz, and many of us have had during our adult lives is kind of okay, let's take a step back and see how we might approach things differently. I don't expect her to make wholesale changes because those rarely stick. And I want changes you can live with and then actually grow from. But maybe trying 2 or 3 things, and then again, the importance of follow up can't be stressed here enough. I don't think we're gonna have one visit and she'll see everything differently, and everybody goes on to live to 120 years old and very happy. But I think it is important to make a first step, especially in a wellness visit, to address these things.
Well, one thing, Chuck, you mentioned, I use this terminology at least with my colleagues and some of my patients. I don't see 48 years old women. To us, this is most of our patients are older. But
this is like a pediatric case for you.
Yeah, it's like we call you, you're too young for us. You're not wise enough for our patient population. But what I try to tell them is this: you are into ultra marathon. Brain health prevention in the journey. It's an ultra marathon. We, hopefully our primary care clinician and ours, we're going to be your coach. We're going to be working with you. You're going to have a lot of deliberate practice. You're going to fail. Things might not get really sustained, but we'll be by your side. We'll go after it. We're going to keep our eyes on your risk factor. We're going to tell you the truth. When your blood pressure is above 130, we're not going to dismiss it, but we're going to see it and we're going to, all right, let's work on it. When we look at your cholesterol and it's very high, we're not going to dismiss it. When we see that you're not exercising enough, we're not going to dismiss it. When your stress management is not optimized, we're not going to dismiss it. And like you said, if we find out you have hearing problem, we confirm it, and we order the hearing aid, and you take it, you start purchasing it, planning to purchase, but you don't use it. We're gonna work with you on how can we problem solve, how can we manage it so you can use the hearing aid. So we are by your side on this journey, for you and for us. I bet most of your patient, in your journey, Chuck, they've been growing up with you, so they started maybe and together. And that's the trust that primary care clinician have with their family that I don't have at all.
Well, no, I think but you have it. Just take you're waiting for them to get a little bit older and wiser. But yeah, it is really important. It's something that we definitely want to focus in primary care. Sometimes I find it's a lot or I guess healthier for me, and maybe more useful to think of myself more as a health coach than a physician in those kinds of cases. Yeah, I'm here to guide you, but ultimately you're going to choose your course, and you know the best path as a patient, and maybe as a with a loved one there as well. But at the end of the day, you have to do it. I'm just here to try to make it as easy as possible. So let's kind of move into our diagnostic phase now, if that's okay with you, Malaz.
So thank you, Chuck. I just want to let you know this is very personal story with me. It was very humbling experience. I thought I know it if I saw it, and I can tell you, like I share with everybody, I missed the diagnosis of my father. And now I'm more humbled and believe that there is need for tools, processing strategy embedded within the primary care system, because of that relationship, Chuck, that you have with the patients for quite some time. You've been on that journey with them for quite some time. That I think I'm not overconfident anymore. That somehow, I'll look at you, and right away by looking into you, I'll find out you have actually mild cognitive impairment dementia. So I've been humbled in what we're going to share with the audience here. A couple of tools, processes, and strategy that can help in the early detections of mild cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's disease, and other related dementia. So you won't face what I had to go through with my dad, and how I misdiagnosed him for at least, I think, 4 or 5 years for sure. So why early detection of Alzheimer's disease? And from my perspective, the big thing is there's 3 breakthroughs that happened in the past 5 to 10 years, specifically in the past 3 years, that this hope, the message of hope, is real now more than before. Number one, we already talked to you about 45% of future risk of dementia, cognitive decline can be prevented. That's unbelievable. Number two, and we'll discuss this in more detail, if you were unlucky and you have an Alzheimer's disease pathology that explain your diagnoses of mild cognitive impairment and dementia, then now, at least in the United States, there's 2 FDA-approved medication that can, within 18 months, can slow down that cognitive functional decline. And the third thing, at least in the United States, if you were very unlucky and unfortunately you developed dementia, we picked you up when you were in the moderate stage, and if your goal, Chuck, is to stay at home as long as possible, now we have a package of a comprehensive dementia care program in the United States. At least 400 facilities in the United States or organizations in the United States are able to provide that service that can keep you at home very, very long and optimize your quality of life and your loved one quality of life. So the message of hope now, it's more than just hope. It's actually a reality. It's now becoming unfair if we're not able to deliver this package of a bundle of brain care to you. So that's number one. Number two, if you are a representative of patients who come over to primary care who are 65 and older, you have a lot of other comorbid conditions. We saw that with the 2 cases that we discussed. For example, diabetes, hypertension, osteoarthritis, and therefore you're going to be taking medication. And some of these medication are psychotropic medication, and you need to make sure, are you taking the right medicine in the right time in the right place? So if you have memory problem, there's no way you will be able to safely take your own medication. And therefore the management of your other chronic conditions will be in jeopardy, including your blood pressure, your diabetes, your coronary artery disease. Then the most important thing for me is if we do early detection of mild cognitive impairment and even dementia, we will be able to give you the opportunity for you as a patient and family to make decision to maintain your autonomy. And that is very, very important step, at least for me personally, and I bet a lot of our audience. And then finally, it will help the primary care clinicians to understand what's the problem of why this patient bouncing in and out of the hospital, why this heart failure, I keep adding medicine to it, and it's still not working. And this is exactly what happened to my father. We couldn't manage him, his medication after he went to the hospital, and he bled. And the reason he bled, because we thought I missed his diagnosis. So he was taking his own Coumadin, Chuck. And guess what happened? He didn't take it correctly. He overtook, so he bled, and we had to hospitalize him. And he was also was not taking his metoprolol, Lasix for the heart failure, and he ended up being in the hospital. And I can't tell you the hospital experience for my father. Obviously, he's in Syria, but I bet a lot of people was not a good experience. So that's the why for early detection and for cognitive decline, dementia, and more specifically Alzheimer's disease. So who should be evaluated for cognitive impairment? Clearly, if patient is symptomatic. Now, the big question is, what do you mean about symptomatic? For sure, if the patient came over and report problem with their memory, report problem with their functional status, report problem with behavioral and psychological symptom, they are symptomatic. We as a clinician are obliged to follow through and figure out and make the diagnosis why. But in older adult, if like with my father, he never complained about his memory problem. But guess who was throwing the red flags? And I wasn't listening. My mom. She kept saying, he's different. I'm like, oh no, I just talked to him. He seems all right. Everything. He's a dentist. So the caregiver, the family member, the care partner, when they come over and do what I call it, kind of pull you out a little bit and say, hey, can I talk to you before you talk with my loved one? That's usually red flags. And then finally, you as a clinician who's been on this journey with the patients for quite some time, you will observe certain things. I live in the United States. My father used to live in Syria, so I didn't have enough time and space with him to be able to pick up these subtle changes. But you as a clinician, if you saw these subtle changes, then they become symptomatics, and you can go from there. Now, we've been able, at least in our healthcare system, we've been able to leverage the electronic medical record system and be able to pick up these red flags from the electronic health record and flag it and send it as a messages to our primary care clinicians. So these are the three type of populations that I think that we should follow in and start assessing their brain health in general, but specifically their cognitive health. So this is a really nice slide that kind of simplified the journey from a healthy aging, unfortunately, all the way to develop dementia. But in that journey, we kind of split it out. A part of that journey where primary care clinicians are crucial for helping and optimizing brain health. And then there's the last section or phase of the journey where you need dementia specialists like myself as a geriatrician or geriatric psychiatrist or behavioral neurologist or what we call memory care clinician. So I'll focus on the primary care clinician, Chuck. This is under your control. This is not a concern. This is not influence. This is a control field. You start with the healthy aging. We talked about the prevention. Then the crucial one is the symptom detection, like what we went through. That patient self-report, caregiver self-report, clinician gut feeling, or an alert generated by the electronic health record. And there you can do, depending on your time allocations, you can start with a simple, brief cognitive tool, and then you move on that journey to do a more full diagnostic workup. And then after that diagnostic workup, which I think primary care clinician can do very well, especially if they organize their system correctly, if you finalize the diagnoses and say this patient have dementia or mild cognitive impairment, then the next step now is confirming the pathology, the underlying pathology. And there depends, most of the time you feel comfortable to do the biomarker referral, confirmation by subspecialty, especially if you had a PET scan. But even that, you can maybe theoretically you can order the PET scan in your place. And, you don't need a geriatrician to order PET scan. If you have access to blood-based biomarker, they get FDA approved in the future. If the insurance cover them, you can actually do the biomarker to confirm the Alzheimer's disease in your practice, and then to do handoff to the memory care clinician, where they can do the infusion, they can develop the dementia care model, and they can monitor it closely. So this journey, you can see there's a lot of opportunity to leverage technology on the entire journey. You can do digital screening tool, you can do digital diagnostic tool, you can do digital monitoring tool. So this journey, it's happening now. I think it's going to be much more prominent within the next 5 years, leveraging all these three breakthrough for the management, but also the digital technology breakthrough in screening, diagnoses, monitoring, cognitive health. So one that kind of gut feeling, or when the red flag happen, or when you do a brief cognitive screening, I think you can set it up as a primary care clinician for a next visit or second visit or third visit. You can chunk that diagnostic evaluation. And actually in the United States now, there's an opportunity, if you end up spending time, like 40 minutes or so, prepping, charting, review the medical record, collecting all the cognitive informations, behavioral information, functional information from the patient and care partner, you can actually get paid and use a high-level RVU because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And at least in the United States now, there's an opportunity to get paid for that work that you are trying to do. So when you follow on the red flag, and when you do all these things, I think primary care clinician can do a lot of things. And this is why, Chuck, now I'm going to hand it over to you. You can tell me if these what I mentioned already, are they implementable, sustainable in the real world primary care? And you are a primary care clinician. You will call me out if I was being in the cloud.
I absolutely would, but I will not. I find nothing. I love your passion, and thank you so much for sharing the story of your father. So sorry to hear about his passing, but I see how much that meant to you. And yeah, we all have patients. My own grandmother died from Alzheimer's disease. So yeah, almost everybody knows somebody close to them who's passed away, and maybe that's patients too. I've had a number of patients pass away. It starts with us though in primary care, as you mentioned. I think I'll just highlight here that one thing, this level 1 screening is very important to accomplish in primary care. So these are laboratories. They're not hard to find. These are something you want to order to set your specialists up for success if you're referring on. The other thing is that everyone with cognitive impairment deserves one brain imaging study. Absolutely should be an MRI if at all possible, because that's going to set them up for success. You really need these things to initiate treatment that's going to make a difference. Also, there are many different screeners, and we'll go through some of the cognitive screeners here in a moment. But don't forget about your depression, anxiety screens, the GAD-7, PHQ-9. Those are fairly easy to administer in primary care. And also check on sleep. That's very important as well. In terms of screening instruments, you choose the one you like, because there are multiple validated instruments. I'm not going to go through all of them, but really the MoCA has emerged as one of the most preferred. It does a good job of testing different cognitive domains, not so much focused on memory like the mini mental status examination is, and is fairly easy to administer. The mini-cog is my go-to when I really don't have time, and I use it for patients who are low risk. If we think back to our 48-year-old patient who was really frazzled and has a very busy life and says, yeah, I keep forgetting things, still unlikely to have a true underlying, say, Alzheimer's pathology, but I could run a mini cog with her, and might be able to reassure her, and that opens up the conversation. Lifestyle changes. Slums can be helpful too. It's a little bit more straightforward for my patients. So again, I have patients who are not used to being tested. Many of them have an educational attainment, at the primary school level. And so therefore, I know that some of the questions on MOCA can be a little bit more complex. Slums might be a little bit easier. And so I use that as well. But you pick these are things you can definitely do in that level 5 visit, or even if you have time with the mini cog, you can certainly fit in at the end of a regular clinic visit as well. So that's the mini cog. For those of you who are less familiar, is just a 3-word registration, and patients have to recite back immediately after being told the words. Then they have to remember them during the process of doing a clock draw test with them, and then you score it based on their clock draw and recall on their recall in the in the word registration. In addition, the MOCA will certainly go beyond that. I think it's a more comprehensive tool, as I mentioned. So it tests other measures of visual spatial cognition as well, and it tends to be more sensitive than the MMSE. It doesn't have the copyright restrictions, although you should go through a brief training in order to use the MOCA appropriately. And then finally, if you get a chance to have a reporter there, that's great. And if I don't have a reporter there, then I'll ask permission to call. Who are you close to? Is there somebody who can tell me about some of these issues you've been having with forgetting? And and so oftentimes it's an adult child, but maybe it's a friend, maybe it's somebody whom they know from one of their social organizations. All good. But yeah, those are the 3 key questions. Are repeating questions? Are they really, do you see them losing their ability to do complex tasks? That's the one the family members are probably going to know a lot about. And are they getting disoriented in a familiar place? And so sometimes when you get into the conversation, you ask the patient, have you gotten lost lately? Well, they keep changing the signs. And so on a generally, when they are able to have the same route and they always go to the store this way, they're unlikely during more mild dementia to become lost in those situations. But it's the day when there's construction and they're rerouted to a different street and they can become completely disoriented and get lost for 3 hours. That's definitely a red flag for dementia. And the AD8 is a nice tool. It's very simple. This is another one that just takes a few minutes. So it's a nice tool that I give to reporters, whoever they may be, to give a report. And it's another validated screening tool that's basically yes or no in terms of the answers. And so that's another tool that I can use to really validate the diagnosis and start to build up a case for Alzheimer's dementia before setting them off for biomarker testing. Also, you want to think about what the patient's doing and start paying attention, get a baseline of their activities of daily living, exactly what they have available to them, and never forget about mood disorders. These are some digital cognitive assessment tools. So these might be helpful if you have, especially if you have someone who can help administer these tests for you. But it's something that patients can do before the patient visit, possibly, that makes your clinic visit go that much faster. And so what's the difference, you may be asking, what is that difference between normal aging and mild cognitive impairment? They didn't really emphasize this to me in medical school for certain. With normal aging, you can take longer to come up with the answer. Like, who is that actor again? Or what was that movie I saw a couple of years ago that I liked? And then 10 minutes later, it just pops into your brain. That's normal aging. It's and that's something I think a lot of us experience as we go through life. But mild cognitive impairment is now we're really forgetting those facts, some of those more recent facts. They're not coming up, and very importantly, you're starting to repeat questions, and so the recent memory is quite affected. But they remain independent, so there's really no disability. You're able to cover for it, and that's where that baseline cognitive status really makes a big difference. And then finally, with dementia, now you have the disability with the cognitive problems, and it's not just memory; it's the ability to do complex tasks as well. So your ADLs are affected overall. So for mild cognitive impairment, your MoCA score is usually going to be 18 to 25, but you still have intact function. And the rate of progression on to dementia for particularly Alzheimer's disease for dementia for MCI is about 10 to 15% per year. So most eventually will progress over. Okay, so now we have another polling question for you. So please address that. All right. So what do we do if the evaluation looks okay? Great. We've screened you now. We've used the 88. We used maybe a MoCA or even a minicog to screen you, but it looks like your cognition is okay. Talk about brain health. Move on in 12 months. If other factors are found, we want to address those. And then if you do still suspect because they have a positive screen, we're gonna have to do some further testing. So we are now starting to round to the finish here, but we have one more case that draws some of these themes together. Gerald is 78 years old. He has hypertension, hyperlipidemia, obesity, sensorineural hearing loss, OA of the knees, and glaucoma. He retired from his job as a city administrator 3 years ago. He's on 7 medications, including an anticholinergic. He missed an ophthalmology appointment last month as well, and no previous cognitive disorders. But his blood pressure is high. It was high 3 months ago. And we increased amlodipine at that time. Previously, his systolic blood pressure had been under control. So why do you think that is? It turns out he moved in with his son last year, and we could call his son. Son confirms father's forgetful and keeps repeating the same stories. Grandchildren had to help Gerald walk to the park with them because he got lost along the way. So we put him through a screener, and his minicog score is 2. So that indicates a problem. And his 88 score is 5, which also suggests a problem. So with that, Malaz, what do you think is going on with Gerald here? How would you approach this case?
I mean, just from what I hear, right away in my mind, this memory trigger Alzheimer's disease possibility. And the question for me is really the question, does he have mild cognitive impairment or dementia? So that's the big one. And if I'm thinking about mild cognitive dementia and most likely a mild cognitive impairment or mild dementia, I'm now interested in if it's Alzheimer's disease. I wanted to know, is there other problem that might make him eligible or ineligible for these disease modifying agents? So MRI for sure, we order it. I'm glad that there's no evidence of microbleed or evidence of a major bleed. Hopefully in this case, we ordered blood-based biomarker. He was able to afford it, and it was positive for Alzheimer's disease. The MMSE, as you mentioned, Chuck's 24, so that's really within the criteria. We order genotyping. It's very important for genotyping of the EPOE because if he has a allele 4/4 risk, or 2 copy of the allele 4, his risk of developing microbleed is almost 50%. So this is why crucial. In this case, he didn't have any copy of the ApoE 4/4. So that's really good news. So officially diagnosis is mild cognitive impairment because when we talked with his son said he was still doing well, outside of memory. His instrumental activity, daily living was really good. His functional assessment questionnaire was much less than 9, and therefore I think it's ideal to start having the conversation about amyloid lowering therapy for him because you have MCI 24 MMSE within the range, ApoE4 non-carrier, and there might be he will be one of the people who might slow down his cognitive function decline by 30% within 18 months. So and this is where we can have a conversation. Do you want to keep your loved one, for the son and the patient, where he is right now? And if that's important, then I think we can set him up for another visit to discuss the benefit and harm of amyloid lowering therapy, and on top of working with him on continue a brain health bundle, the medication adherence in this case. Like I will be talking with the son, Chuck, to say, look, the blood pressure issue, I think I'm worried that he might not be taking these medications. So please take over and work with you. We will simplify it, but let's do that. So for sure, medication adherence, I'll hand it over. I'll outsource this to the son and maybe the grandkids that it seems like are involved in his case. But this is a possibility of disease modifying agents. Really good. we'll hand it over to our memory care practice where they have the infusion and they have a really nice protocol to follow up and monitoring him, make sure he get the benefit, not the harms.
Yeah, and that's probably my message of hope here is that even if you decide not to pursue monoclonal antibodies, and there's reason not to, not everybody's a candidate, but you actually fit in the window, and unfortunately we miss a lot of patients. They've actually developed more moderate to severe dementia where they're not really going to qualify for monoclonal antibody. At that point, the disease has progressed too far, and they're not going to significantly benefit from that treatment, which is a bit of a shame. So here I think of it more as an opportunity. It's nice to have the option, if nothing else. With that, Malaz, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, so please don't forget about brain health. Don't Let's not practice below the neck medicine only. Let's move above the neck. I think we're mature as a healthcare system to do that. And remember, brain health prevention and CV health or cardiovascular disease have a lot of overlap. And primary care doctor Chuck, like you guys are the star in that piece. If patients have any kind of symptom reported by themselves, by their family member, or you notice, start the cascade of brief, depending on your resources, brief cognitive assessment, diagnostic workup, blood-based biomarker or other biomarker confirmation, and handoff for the dementiologist if you want to. If you are on that journey, it's a complicated journey. I loved listening to you, Chuck. To have this shared decision making involve not just the patient and family, talk with them, listen deeply to them, and work with them. And you don't need to tell them everything right away. You can chunk it. You can do a couple of visit. Specifically, you can maybe arrange a family visit where the patient and family come over to disclose the diagnoses, co-design the brain care plan and the journey with them, and assure them that you will always be by their side on this journey. So for more information, you have this amazing website, peerview.com 2025 brain health. Over there, if you could submit post-test and evaluation for credit, download the slide, and we have a lot of resources and tools. You can watch the replay for the 24 hours. Request a live meeting if you want to with Chuck, for sure, and with me, and then visit pacealz.com for more resources. And there's other resources in the foundation that dedicated all their effort to give resource tools and processes to support the healthcare system and the patient and the family. Bright Focused Foundation is a very important resources.
Now, I want to thank you as our audience as well. Hopefully you found this discussion helpful to your practice. It's certainly pragmatic and something I see every day. But I know you're very busy. Thanks for taking the time, and be well, everyone.